For years, Texas has been the escape hatch. When housing markets on the coasts went off the rails, people didn't debate it, they moved. They sold the small, expensive place. They packed the car, and they came to Texas chasing the same promise: more house, more land, and a payment that didn't feel like a trap. And for a while, it worked. Suburbs exploded outward. Builders poured concrete like it was printing money. Investors bragged about cash flow and acted like Texas real estate was immune to gravity. But in 2026, gravity is back. Rates stayed high long enough to change behavior. Taxes rose because valuations rose. Insurance climbed because storms, hail, and rebuilding costs aren't theoretical anymore. They're annual. And across multiple Texas metros, you're seeing the signals that show up before headlines do. Inventory stacking up, price cuts multiplying, and sellers quietly realizing the market doesn't care what they paid. So today, we're counting down 10 Texas cities where home prices are at serious risk of a sharp decline in 2026. Not because Texas is finished, not because everyone's leaving tomorrow, but because the math that held this boom together is breaking. And once the math breaks, the story doesn't matter. Stay through number one. Because the last city on this list wasn't just part of the boom, it was the poster child. The city everyone pointed to as proof that Texas was unstoppable. Now it's showing cracks. Let's begin. Number 10, Corpus Christi. The Gulf Coast reality check-in. Corpus Christi has always been a working city before it was a hype city. Port operations, refineries, shipping, tourism, fishing, blue-collar fundamentals. For years that kept prices grounded. The coast was still accessible to regular incomes, and owning near the water didn't require billionaire money. Then the national housing boom hit, and Corpus shifted roles without really asking for it. Out-of-state buyers saw listings near the Bay and Barrier Islands and thought they'd found a loophole in the American housing market. Second home buyers grabbed properties on Mustang Island. Investors from inland Texas scooped up small houses, duplexes, and older rentals, thinking they could serve refinery workers and tourists at the same time. For a while, it looked like Corpus was finally getting its moment. But in 2026, the attention feels different, heavier. Insurance on the Gulf has become a serious burden. Wind and storm coverage that used to feel like a manageable premium now hits budgets like a second utility bill. When insurance costs jump, the cheap coastal property thesis breaks fast because the monthly math changes even if the sale price doesn't. Add property taxes that rose with valuations, and suddenly the all-in cost of ownership doesn't look like a bargain. Here's the deeper issue. Local wages didn't rise at the same speed as home values and carrying costs. The port doesn't magically double salaries because out-of-state investors want beach houses. The result is predictable. The buyer pool shrinks. You see it in listing behavior. Homes sit longer in older neighborhoods, away from the water, and in newer subdivisions on the edge of town. Sellers who anchored to 2022 peak comps are forced to cut, then cut again. Properties that once drew multiple offers now draw one cautious buyer asking for repairs, closing credits, and a lower price because they can. The power shifted, and investors who thought they were buying easy rentals are learning the ugly side of the spreadsheet. Vacancy is expensive, maintenance is real, and insurance can wipe out a paper-thin margin. Corpus Christi isn't collapsing as a city. The port is still there. The beaches still pull people, but the gap between what homes cost and what the local economy can support is widening. That gap is where price resets happen. And number 9, El Paso, a stable market pushed too hard. El Paso is not Dallas and it's not Houston. It's a border city, a military city, and historically a slower moving market. For years, that meant predictability. Prices moved, but they didn't launch into orbit. People bought homes to live in them, not to win a speculative race. Then two things changed the rhythm. First, remote work and rising costs in Phoenix, Denver, and California pushed some buyers to look for a more affordable desert metro with character. Second, investors looked at El Paso's low base prices and steady military presence and saw an opportunity. Buy cheap, hold, and wait for the rest of the country to discover it. So they bought starter homes, older duplexes, new builds in the expanding suburbs, and prices climbed sometimes faster than the wages that actually drive El Paso. Base jobs, education, trucking, healthcare support roles, service work, logistics. When a market that used to be stable becomes a target for outside expectations, it can get ahead of itself without people noticing. The danger isn't that the city is weak. The danger is that the price level becomes disconnected from what local households can safely pay. In 2026, higher mortgage rates expose that disconnect. A payment that felt manageable at 3% becomes brutal at 7%. Insurance and taxes creep up. And some outside buyers who rushed in are now looking to exit, especially those who bought multiple properties. The signals show up in plain sight. More inventory in new subdivisions, more price cuts in listing histories, more deals falling apart when buyers can't get financing at current rates. And when an investor-heavy market turns, it doesn't turn gently. Investors sell faster than families because they're not emotionally anchored, they're financially anchored. The minute the numbers don't work, they're gone. El Paso remains a strong community with real strengths, but it's on this list for one reason. It doesn't take a massive recession to create pain when affordability is already stretched. It only takes higher rates and wages that never had time to catch up. Number 8, Waco. When a town becomes a product, Waco used to be a drive-through city, a dot between Dallas and Austin. Then it became something else, a brand. Tourism, media attention, and the weekend getaway economy rewrote the perception. Suddenly, Waco wasn't just a place, it was a vibe. A bargain market where you could buy an older house, renovate it, and live the dream, or rent it out short term and let visitors pay your mortgage. That image pulled in outside money. Investors bought bungalows and ranch houses in established neighborhoods. They saw low prices, decent charm, and a strategic location between two major metros. New subdivisions expanded outward, and for a few years, the new story fed itself. But here's the problem with brand-driven housing markets. They're more fragile than they look. By the early 2020s, prices had reset to levels that were hard for local teachers, nurses, and factory workers to justify. Many deals only made sense if you assumed continuing demand from tourists, short-term renters, and remote workers chasing small city living. In 2026, those assumptions are weaker. Short-term rental growth has cooled in many places, and regulators are more willing to question how many visitor-focused properties one community can absorb before the local housing stock gets distorted. Remote workers have more options across the Sun Belt now, which means Waco isn't competing with no options. It's competing with everywhere. Combine that with high mortgage rates and you get a local buyer pool that can't pay peak era prices, that shows up as listings that linger and reductions that stack. And the renovation magic doesn't work the same anymore. Buyers are more skeptical. They look past the staging and ask about foundations, roofs, HVAC, and whether the appraisal will support the price. Some homeowners who renovated using loans now face higher monthly payments, rising taxes, and a softer resale market. And when the bank appraisal comes in low, it doesn't matter how pretty the kitchen is, the deal breaks. Waco still has location and tourism, but the housing market is flashing a clear warning. If a town's identity shifts too far from the people who live there to the people who visit or speculate, it becomes vulnerable the second those visitors look elsewhere. Number 7. Killeen, the military town margin call. Near Fort Cavazos, formerly Fort Hood, Killeen has always been a military town first. That means a steady rotation of renters and buyers. For years, investors loved it for a simple reason. There would always be someone needing housing. Then, that steady advantage turned into a buying frenzy. Small investors from across the country bought single-family homes and small multi-units, convinced the tenant pipeline was guaranteed. Many overpaid because the spreadsheet showed profit as long as rents kept rising. Local families trying to stop renting found themselves competing against cash buyers who could close fast and waive contingencies. The hidden risk was obvious if you stared at it long enough. A city whose housing demand depends heavily on base, staffing decisions, and federal policy ended up with home values priced for perpetual growth. In 2026, thin margins get punished. Higher mortgage rates reduce local buying power. Property taxes and insurance climb. And landlords who bought at peak pricing face bigger payments, rising repair costs, and tenants who can't absorb endless rent increases. When cash flow is tight, 1 or 2 months of vacancy can erase a year's profit. Then the reality hits. Roofs fail, AC units die, foundations shift, especially in Texas soils, and those bills don't care about your investment thesis. So what happens? Landlords sell, and they sell in clusters because investors tend to own the same kinds of properties in the same neighborhoods. That creates concentrated inventory, more for sale signs in the same area, which pressures prices. Homeowners feel it too. If orders change or life forces a move, there's no guarantee buyers will pay enough to clear the mortgage. Killeen may look stable on the surface because the base is active, but the housing market underneath is built on outside expectations and fragile cash flow. If conditions tighten further in 2026, prices can adjust quickly and painfully for people who bought late. Number 6, San Antonio, when affordable stops being true. San Antonio's brand used to be stability, not as flashy as Austin, not as sprawling as Houston, but big, diverse, and historically more affordable. Military, healthcare, tourism, and a broad service economy kept the city resilient. For a long time, that meant normal housing. Then, the Texas boom reframed it. As Austin became a symbol of runaway prices, buyers repeated a new line. If you can't afford Austin, go to San Antonio. Investors and out-of-state movers listened. They bought on the north side, in fast-growing suburbs, and in older neighborhoods near downtown. Prices jumped. Wages didn't jump at the same rate. By the early 2020s, San Antonio families realized their city wasn't the value play anymore. Property taxes rose as appraisals climbed. Insurance followed. And in 2026, the pressure is finally changing behavior. Many buyers have stepped back. They're not willing to carry a massive payment in a city that was supposed to be the alternative to massive payments. Builders respond the only way they can: incentives, rate buydowns, closing help, upgrades, anything to move inventory. And when builders get aggressive, it pulls the whole market down because resale sellers have to compete with new homes plus discounts. Watch the listings and you'll see the story. More reductions, more deals failing, more homes returning to market, more sellers testing prices and learning the hard way that the buyer pool has limits. Landlords who bought rentals during the frenzy are also getting squeezed. Rents rose, but not enough to cover bigger loans, higher taxes, and repairs. When cash flow turns negative, a lot of small-time investors realize they don't actually want a second job managing a property they can't profit from. San Antonio is still a major city with real strengths, but it's not immune to the basics. When local households begin to feel that buying is a trap instead of an upgrade, prices have to adjust. Number 5, Houston, big market, big inventory, big exposure. Houston has always played by different rules. No traditional zoning, endless expansion, booms and busts tied to energy and global trade, a massive medical sector, and a metro that can build outward almost forever. That flexibility creates a particular kind of risk. Supply can come online fast, and when supply rises into weakening demand, price pressure follows. The last growth wave reinforced Houston's confidence. Master planned communities expanded in every direction. The inner loop added mid-rises and high-rises. Investors bought townhomes and suburban houses in bulk. Cheap mortgages made high prices feel normal. People accepted long commutes and flood risk because the payment worked and because they believed values would keep climbing. In 2026, the math is harder. Mortgage rates are higher. Insurance in flood-prone and storm-vulnerable areas has surged. If a neighborhood has flooded multiple times in recent years, buyers become cautious, and cautious buyers demand discounts. Taxes don't adjust downward quickly, so owners can be stuck with peak-era tax bills even as the market cools. And inventory is building. New homes started during the peak are still delivering, and existing owners list when they realize their equity isn't as thick as they assumed. Houston won't collapse as one single event. It's too large and too diverse. But that's not how declines happen anyway. They happen zip code by zip code, segment by segment, especially in outer suburbs where dozens of similar homes compete at once, and in certain inner loop pockets where investor demand fades. When sellers outnumber confident buyers, the market stops being a seller's market. Then it becomes a negotiation market. Then it becomes a discount market. That's the path. Number 4, Fort Worth priced like Dallas, paid like Fort Worth. Fort Worth has long been the quieter counterpart in the Dallas-Fort Worth story. A working identity, aerospace, freight, industrial growth, a more grounded culture. For a long time, the housing followed that identity. You could work a normal job and still buy a normal house. The last decade changed the balance. As Dallas and its closer suburbs surged, buyers pushed west. New development expanded toward Alliance and beyond. Inside the city, older neighborhoods got marketed as next up. Investors followed, flipping starter homes and small duplexes. It looked like Fort Worth was finally cashing in. But the danger is when a city gets priced like its richer neighbor without matching household incomes. Higher mortgage rates turned affordable payments into strain. Property taxes, recalculated after years of rising values, squeezed people whose wages didn't keep pace. Insurance costs rose as rebuild costs rose. And now you can see the tension. In growth corridors, the same floor plan shows up again and again online, each time slightly cheaper than the last. In closer in areas, flipped homes sit while buyers ask a simple question. Does this price match a Fort Worth paycheck or a Dallas fantasy? Fort Worth still has momentum, but momentum doesn't erase affordability math. When that mismatch becomes obvious, values reprice quietly, first, then quickly. Number 3, Dallas. The brand meets the budget Dallas sells: confidence, bigger freeways, bigger office, parks, bigger growth, bigger everything. During the boom, that mindset turned into a housing ideology. Any Dallas real estate was a winning ticket. Investors renovated aging homes in Oak Cliff and East Dallas, assuming every block would become premium. Families stretched for new builds far out, trading commute time for square footage. Condos in Uptown sold on the belief that the skyline itself would protect value. In 2026, the shine is duller. Some headline relocations haven't translated into endless job growth at the household level. Office space isn't as dominant as it was, and remote work reshapes demand because a Dallas-based job doesn't always require a Dallas-based home. Meanwhile, property taxes and insurance premiums remain elevated. The impact shows up in small signals. Renovated homes sitting long enough that staging starts to look tired. Builder subdivisions competing with each other using incentives that didn't exist a few years ago. Buyers negotiating harder because they know more listings are coming. Dallas will remain a major business hub. But even strong markets have limits. When the Dallas brand runs ahead of Dallas household budgets, prices get pulled back toward reality. Number 2, Frisco premium suburb. Premium vulnerability. Frisco turned suburban Texas into a product. Top-ranked schools, shiny retail, stadiums, master-planned communities. Complete life within a few miles. During the frenzy, bidding wars were normal. 2-income households stretched for large homes at premium prices. Builders raised prices before the concrete dried. Investors paid top dollar assuming demand would be endless. By the end of that cycle, the numbers were extreme. Entry-level homes carried jumbo-style payments. Property taxes looked like an extra car payment. Owners justified it with the standard premium suburb logic: schools, amenities, and the belief that Frisco will always be the top choice north of Dallas. In 2026, the cracks are subtle, but real. Higher interest rates directly cap what even affluent families can borrow without wrecking their monthly budget. Hiring isn't as frantic everywhere as it was, and more people can keep their job without living in one specific zip code. Homes linger longer at the end of cul-de-sacs. Builders lean on incentives, closing credits, rate buydowns, upgrade packages because they have to. On the resale side, you can often trace reductions through listing history as sellers detach from peak comps. The risk in Frisco isn't collapse, it's valuation. Prices ran ahead of what even strong earners can comfortably support. And when a city is built on the assumption that people will always stretch to live there, a small drop in appetite can create a large drop in prices. Number 1, Austin. The myth meets the market. Austin is where the Texas housing story became a national legend. Tech campuses, live music, festivals, lakes, venture capital Austin was sold as the place where the future lived. And for years, the market behaved like it believed that story fully. Bungalows that used to house musicians and teachers sold for surreal sums. East Austin flipped hard. Suburban corridors around Round Rock, Leander, Kyle, and beyond filled with subdivisions that sold out fast. Investors came from everywhere: room rentals, single-family rentals, build-to-rent communities built on one core assumption: as long as the Austin machine keeps pulling people in, there is no such thing as overpaying. Then the environment changed. Higher rates made inflated prices feel heavy overnight. Tech hiring cooled compared to peak conditions. The cost of living collided with mortgage payments set at peak valuations. And suddenly, not every buyer felt lucky to win a home in Austin. Some felt trapped by the payment, the taxes, the insurance, and the uncertainty. In 2026, the shift shows up in the listings. Clusters of similar homes in suburban tracts competing against each other, each owner trying to cut before the next cut. Condos that were pitched as perfect for remote workers lingering longer because buyers ask harder questions about job stability and value. Sellers who bought at the peak and need to move, discovering they have less equity than expected or none. Austin is still Austin. Culture doesn't vanish. The skyline doesn't disappear. But Austin is number one because no other Texas city pushed value so far based on belief. And when belief weakens, price has to do the work. The pattern Texas can't outrun, from Corpus Christi to El Paso, from Waco and Killeen to San Antonio, Houston, Fort Worth, Dallas, Frisco, and Austin, the pattern repeats. Texas spent years being marketed as the place where home prices could rise without breaking people the way they did on the coasts. Lower cost, more land, strong growth. That was the pitch. In 2026, the bill shows up in the monthly payment. High mortgage rates compress buying power. Insurance keeps climbing, especially where storms and hail are no longer rare. Property taxes remain heavy because appraisals don't drop as fast as sentiment. Wages didn't always keep pace. And beneath all of it is the one truth no marketing campaign can erase. Home values can't stay detached from what local households can actually afford. If this breakdown helped you see past the hype and into the pressure building under these markets, keep watching what happens next. Because the next phase isn't just about price charts. It's about behavior. It's about when buyers stop chasing, when sellers start chasing buyers, and when investors decide the game isn't worth playing anymore. In the end, a house is more than an asset line on a spreadsheet. It's a bet on a place, a paycheck, and a future. And in these 10 Texas cities, that bet is about to get tested.